All right, well, we're going to pick up with a new parable today. So we go back to our study that we've been doing on looking at some of these parables of Jesus. We're not going to be looking at every single one. There would be a lot to choose from in that regard. But we will be looking at, several of these here. And I think it'll be exciting for all of us to read these things. And turn, if you would, to Matthew chapter number 25. Matthew chapter number 25, and that'll be kind of our launching point here for our text. Now, I wasn't ever planning on this being the type of series where I would start and then have to finish the next week, but there's just so much information, so much context to cover, and so I don't want to waste anyone's time, but also I don't want to just breeze by the Word of God and not take the time to really understand it and to try to rightly divide as best we can. So today we'll be launching us into yet another familiar parable regarding a theme of ownership and stewardship. It's important to take care of our own needs and possessions, but the Christian life goes beyond the maintaining of self, but also centers around watching over those things which do not belong to us, but the things that we are responsible for. And so this parable here that we're going to look at today, the first slide here should show us is the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents in Matthew chapter number 25. So I'll turn to join with you there. And we need to, again, it's always helpful to think about the background and some of the context surrounding the situation. Now, this will be one of Jesus' final sermons that he preaches. Shortly after this, he goes into the upper room with his disciples. And then after that, of course, they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he goes on to fulfill his passion and his crucifixion. So this will be one of his last kind of public messages and sermons that he preaches. Following these parables, he'll be making preparations for the Last Supper and his passion. In this closing message recorded by Matthew, the chapter contains three different parables, if you will, or three different story accounts. The first two fit what we would call kind of the standard of the parable in the sense that they are very much it's like unto, or, there was a man, or whatever it is. Like, it's a very much fits more of the story as many of the other parables. But rather, the third is just kind of a thinly veiled picture of the judgment of mankind from God's perspective there. And so, though it's not a direct account, it's speaking about these things to come in the future. The theme of the chapter and the stories within are all pointing to the eventual return of our Savior. That's the context, if you will, of each one of these different parables, is all of them are talking about and pointing to his return, which of course is much of what Jesus preached and taught to his disciples before he went to his crucifixion. And even in the following chapter with Peter, in chapter number 26, he challenges Peter, that he would deny him 3 times even before the end of the night. And so these are all these kind of final, again, principles and sermons being preached to not only the public, but also even to his own disciples. And so the theme always comes around this thought of these parables. The theme is around the return of the Savior and the reward or recompense for what is done in his absence. God wants to reward and bless his people in this life, but also in the life to come. And these parables show us that he is looking for, he's looking forward to his return, and we ought to as well. We often think about that from our own kind of personal perspective of, man, we're so excited for Jesus Christ to come back and take us home, and that we can go and be with him, and those are all very exciting things. But also, the Savior is anticipating our reunion as well. He is looking forward to that time where he'll be able to call the saints unto himself, and the bride and the bridegroom again will be joined together. He is anticipating, looking forward to that as well. It's not just us. One aspect we ought to consider also about this parable is the kind of cultural implications and the basis of servanthood that was very much in play during this time. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that nobody here has any servants at home. You have children, and they shouldn't be treated as servants, but we have kids who help us with different things and whatnot. But we don't go home and we've got people there, to welcome us to take our things, who've been taking care of the house and the livestock and, whatever else. Like, that's not the culture that we live in, obviously here in this Western culture especially. So it's not really a concept that we handle a lot, but we know some things from different entertainment or history, whatever it is. There's a lot of these things. But the concept of people having servants, I mean, this was a very common practice and a very common, again, language of the day. So when Jesus is talking about servanthood, they would all be familiar with this concept and with this principle. And also not just of the servanthood, but also the concept of stewardship, in the sense of someone who was a steward over something. The characters of our parable are subject servants to a master and are being charged with the care of his goods. And that's what the whole role of a steward is that it wasn't that they had their own things they were watching over, but they were put in charge of something that belonged to someone else. And you think about the Old Testament with Joseph and Potiphar. Really, Joseph was a steward of Potiphar's goods, of Potiphar's estate, where it says that he put everything into his hand and he didn't even think about what he was doing because Joseph handled it all. That's a steward. The house and the estate and all of the servants and everything else, that didn't belong to Joseph. He was just simply overseeing it and taking care of it. And so that's kind of the principle here being presented, is not just a servant of someone showing up and saying, yes, sir, what do you need? But it goes beyond that to stewardship. This is more than being a servant, again, or just obedient, but these men are given charge and responsibility for the possessions that don't belong to them. And it is not for you to waste or throw away. It wasn't that it was given into their possession as some type of gift, saying, okay, now this belongs to you. Do with it as you will. And we'll talk, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but with these things that were given to them, there was an expectation of how these goods would be handled like the master would do it. They weren't just given it, they weren't supposed to just be given these things and then, oh, well, I can just do whatever I want with it. There was this expectation that came along with it. So this passage is also paralleled in Luke chapter number 19, but we're going to just focus here in this context of Matthew chapter number 25. And let's read through this account, beginning in verse number 14, and refamiliarize ourselves with this passage. For the kingdom of heaven, verse 14, is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knowest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which hath 10. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. From him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So it's quite the illustration here. You go from a really kind of a high, in a sense, in the middle, when you come to the zenith of this illustration of this reckoning with the servants. And the 5 talent guy and the 2 talent guy, they give these great reports, and they have this kind of, hey, man, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord, such a wonderful recompense for the things that they had done. And then it takes a very steep, dark turn when it comes to the person with 1 talent, and they reveal what they did, or rather didn't do, in the meantime that they were given. So as we go through kind of the theme here and the meaning is, and we're going to break down the portions of this passage and look at the different parts of it, I'd like us first to look at, number one, the servants. The servants. And this is detailed to us with, again, the introduction of this parable, but also tells us a little bit about these servants in verses number 14 through 18. So let's read those again. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants. So these are not strangers. These are not his neighbors, friends, or something else. These are his servants. And he delivered unto them his goods. So he didn't just say, oh, hey, by the way, here's some stuff. Have fun with it. There was work expected from this responsibility that was given to them. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. And this is such an important phrase here. To every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. And, we can look at when we look at the rewards of the 5-talent man and the 2-talent man, and you can see the way that the master in this story replies to these servants. He's not mad at the 2-talent guy that he didn't make 5 more talents. He was given 2. He multiplied his due. He did what he could with what he had. And so that was all that was expected, was just do what you can with what you have. It wasn't about trying to hold him to some other standard of, well, I've given this guy 5, and I'm starting you with 2, so you've got it more difficult than this guy, and I have the same expectation. The expectation actually proportionally was the same to what they were given. And so also, not only was it proportionally given, but also it says it to his several ability. That maybe one was more well-versed in the financial realm, and so he could trust him with more. Maybe one guy was learning, or maybe one guy just that wasn't his area of expertise, and so he was given the talents and didn't have the same expectation, again, in size of return, but had the same expectation in the proportion. And then the 1-talent guy could have been someone new, could have been a younger person, could have been a newer servant or something who wasn't as familiar, whatever it is. So everyone was given a different number, and it wasn't random, but it was according to the ability that the master saw in that person. That didn't make them less valuable. Well, I got my 5-talent guy here. He's the best. He's the cream of the crop. And I've got some 2- and 1-talent servants, that they're kind of hanging out. There wasn't priority given to them. Rather, each of them had their responsibility over the goods that were delivered to them. So it wasn't about one person making so much or whatever else, but it's about each person, again, doing something with what they had. And then continuing on there, we get this kind of snapshot of what each of these servants did in verse 16. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. So again, from this portion of verses here in verses 14 through 18, these are the master's servants and these are the master's goods. The responsibility of the master's goods was not on somebody else, but rather those who were his servants, those who were trusted, those obviously who were close to him and in his employment. And everyone was given what they could handle. Everyone was given what they can handle. They can't all handle the same thing. Us in this room today, if I was to put a computer in front of you, some people may not even know how to turn it on. If I told you that there was a problem with the computer, you wouldn't know where to look or what terms to use and whatever else. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. But someone who has talent in that area or practice or whatever it is, they would be better suited for that task. And so it's not that one person is less than another person, but everybody has a several ability. We all have different areas of talents or expertise or whatever it is. And so the goods that you're delivered, again, in this life from the Lord, it's not about trying to compare and be what somebody else is. It's about doing the things with what God has put in front of you. And so they all had access also to the same tools and opportunities. They all lived in the same area. They all had the same marketplace. They all had the same kind of parameters and everything else. And 2 of them chose to take advantage of the systems and of the opportunities that were there. But one of them operated in fear. And of course, that's revealed to us. It says, but he that received the 1 talent digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. And it's revealed in verse 25, and I was afraid. The man who had 1 talent Again, according to the ability, God knew that, or the master knew that he couldn't handle more than that one. And even with the one he had, he shied away from it. He knew that there was an expectation that, well, I know that you're a hard man. I know that you sow where you haven't reaped, or reap where you have not sowed, and basically you're looking for growth, and you have this expectation, and that scared me. And so I went and hid it. And so in fear, this man in verse number 18 goes and hides it. So two of them were looking at the opportunity, and one of them was just looking at the expectation and the fear that came along with it. And even when he left, it doesn't say that I expect everybody to double what they've done, because it's revealed at the end when verse number 27, thou oughtest therefore to have put it my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. He was just saying, hey, you could have just dropped off my talent at the local bank, let it gain some interest while I'm gone, and then when I came back, at least there's something on top of the one talent that I gave you. But instead, you did nothing. He didn't do anything. And so the expectation wasn't that everybody had the same return, just everyone needed to do something. Everyone needed to do something with what they had. So we get a picture of these servants, these two, again, who are diligent in their labors and in their opportunities, and we see them being blessed. And then we have one who is operating in fear. So not only the servants, but then you have number two, the reckoning. You have the reckoning in verse number 19. And after a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. Now, the word reckon here means to settle the account or set the record straight. So essentially, he gave it to them, and there was going to be a time of accountability given for the talents that were put into their care. It wasn't, and they didn't know how long it was going to be. It just says in the beginning that he traveled to a far country. And verse 19 says after a long time. We don't know that he communicated when he was returning. And so these men were given these goods and said, hey, do something with this while I'm gone. And then there is coming this time, again, a time of accountability. So the master came back after a long time from a far country. And again, we don't see here that he gave a definite time of return. And every servant was going to have to give an account for what they did with what they were given. Not comparing it to one another, but rather individually, they had to give an account. And of course, we are familiar with the story and kind of basic application here, that I'm accountable for me. You're accountable for you. And so what someone else does with their talents or their opportunities or what they do in their race of life, whatever it is, you're not accountable for that. That's their choice. That's their decision. Now, of course, we have the position of influence and leadership and parents and everything else. And so there is a degree of accountability there. If we tell our kids, hey, go make this bad decision, and they do, you can't say, oh, well, not my fault. Again, you instructed them in that way. But ultimately, everyone has free will. Everyone has the ability to choose what they want to do. And so these men were accountable for what was given to them, not as a group, not collectively, but rather individually. And so we have the 1 talent, the 2 talent, and the 5 talent. The reckoning came to all of them. Nobody was exempt. He didn't come to the 5 talent guy and say, hey, you know what? I already know you took care of your business. You're good. You don't even need to stop by my office. But rather, everyone was accountable. No matter how many several abilities they had or how many talents were given to them, everyone had to have this time of reckoning and accountability. And so number 3 here, through verses 20 through 23, we have the accounting and accolades. The accounting and accolades in verses 20 through 23. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, and here's his reckoning. Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. Period. He didn't say, did you see how much the 2 talent guy did? He wasn't trying to tattle on other people. He wasn't trying to compare himself and say, well, I noticed some you gave 1 and 2, but you gave me 5, and I know that's a lot of pressure, but hey, you know what? I could handle it. And so let me show you what I did with what you gave me. He didn't make it about him at all, but rather simply he says, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents, and I've gained beside them 5 talents more. He just gave a simple accounting and report of what he had done. He wasn't being prideful. He wasn't boastful. He wasn't comparing and trying to lift himself up above his other fellow servants. He realized, I'm accountable for what I was given, and so that's what I'm going to take responsibility for. And so we have the similar report and also, again, the reward, if you will, from these two. And so verse 21 says, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So by managing the little he was given, and to this man, it says here, few things. So the 5 talents to this man, it says, were a few things. So because I made you faithful over a few things, now you can be a ruler over many things. So the greater reward, the greater responsibility, the greater influence, or the whatever, however you want to label it, the bigger position came after he handled the 5 talents. He didn't just automatically get promoted. It took those steps, and for this man, it was the 5 talents. And so because he was faithful over the little that he was given of the Lord, because really, if this master, if this Lord is very wealthy, a couple talents probably isn't that big of a deal. Whether he loses it or whatever else, he has more responsibilities, and so this is how this man is proving himself that he can handle it. Then it's basically rinse and repeat in verse 22 and 23 here. But with 2 talents, Lord, he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained other 2 talents beside them. He didn't, sorry I didn't do what the 5 talent guy did. Sorry I didn't do what so-and-so did. Hey, and again, I only did 2 talents, but did you see what he did? He buried his. He's not comparing. He's not trying to put anyone down, put himself up. He's just simply accounting for what he was given. He's just being honest with where he's at. And then, of course, he gets a similar accolade because he was rewarded for what he did with what he had. So, verse 23, his Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So just because the 2 talent guy didn't come back with 5 talents or more, he didn't say, after your performance review, we're actually going to keep you in the position you're at. No, because with what he did, what he could with what he was given. And that's the principle we need to understand about this, is it's not about what other people do or what other people get. It's what you do with what you get. And so you may be in a position in life where you don't have a whole bunch of talents or abilities right now, talents in the sense of just responsibilities that have been given to you. Manage that 1, manage that 2 like it's everything you got. Don't just look and wish that you were something else. So we get this kind of very familiar this illustration here of this first man and the second man. Even though they had different talents and they had proportional returns, they received the same reward. So they didn't look around and compare or complain. They just accepted their roles and executed on the responsibilities they were given. And this is the ideal story. This is the ideal part of this, because the master gave, the servants worked, and everybody profited. It wasn't just to the profit of the master, but rather because of what they did, they were then promoted to now be in charge of more things and have more opportunities. So it's a win-win situation when you manage the things that God has given you, because not only do you get to then exercise your faith or whatever it is to grow yourself, but then also you get to partake and enjoy the blessings as well. However, then we have the last character of this story, the 1 talent servant. And then, so I'd like to point out number 4, the disappointment. The disappointment. So starting verse number 24, then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. So again, he already knows the expectation of his master. He understands that the expectation is that he's not going to sit by and just let things go. He's looking for growth. He's looking for increase. He's not happy just to sit by and let things be or go for the status quo. So he's going to push. He's going to work. In verse number 25, again, this key phrase right here, and I was afraid. And I was afraid. So he's operating in fear, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. The third and final servant brings his report, and it's not what was to be expected, especially in light of the other 2. And he knew his master's expectations and also his master's instruction. He knew what he could have done to bring some profit. He could have done something. Even as the master says to him, you could have done the minimal amount and just have put it into the exchangers, and then at my coming, I get something back from it, just some kind of profit, minimal work. It would require no sacrifice other than a trip to the exchangers and some paperwork. That's all it would have taken, is just go by, hey, my master gave this, here's 1 talent, sign the paper, I'll come get it when he returns. Okay, sounds good. Then he comes back and, oh, hey, here's your talent back, here's the interest or the profit that was made from you lending that to us. Okay, awesome, hey, thank you. Take it home. Like, it's just 2 trips to the exchangers and back. That's all it would have been. The bare minimum. But he wouldn't even do that. He was scared. He wouldn't even do the bare minimum, the smallest of things, because he was scared. Now, why was he scared? Was he scared just because, as it says here, he knows that he didn't want to disappoint his master? I know my master's got big expectations, and I don't know if I can meet those expectations. Did he make it about himself rather than about, again, the opportunity that was given to him? Not sure exactly what it was, but I do know this, that if we're going to be successful, or if this man was going to experience success in regards to this, it probably would require some discomfort. It would require hard work. It would require sacrifice. These things and many more are often an accompaniment to success, to increase, to profit. It's not going to come free. It's not going to come easy. It's going to take discomfort, hard work, sacrifice, blood, sweat, tears, extra time, long hours, late nights, whatever. Like, if you're going to try to build something and make something great, it's going to take work. And this man seemed to be afraid of the work and the sacrifice it would take to bring an expectation that would be worthy of his master. His fear of his responsibility and the pressure that came along with it kept him from blessings. Again, he could have profited. He could have brought his 1 and multiplied to the 1, or even had the 1 with some interest or whatever, and still it would have been something. But he missed out on the blessing because he wasn't willing to put in the work. So instead of blessings, the servant obviously displeased his master greatly and was put aside, and his responsibilities were given to one who was proven, because the work of the master still needed to be done. The talents still needed to be put to work. There still was, again, increase in growth and profit to be made. And so it was going to happen one way or the other. And apparently it was happening without this servant. So he took what was his responsibility and he said, this is still going to get done, but I'm going to have to give it to somebody else because this person failed to take care of it themselves. And that's a scary place to be. A scary place to be is where if God has given us charge over something and we don't even take care of maybe what seems to be insignificant, that God would take that opportunity and give it to somebody else, because guess what? The work still needs to be done. People still need to be reached. Ministry still needs to happen. God still needs to be glorified and exalted. And so if we're not going to do it, he's going to give it to somebody who will. So with now going through this passage here, I want us to consider the application of this parable, of this story. And I just have 3 simple points. And I know typically when we come to a passage like this, and you've heard it here and you've probably heard it in other places as well, when you talk about talents and how you break that up, and you talk about what kind of talents you have with your time and your abilities or your treasures, whatever it is. But I'm actually not going to go in that direction. I want us to consider some things that we've already kind of hinted at, but I want to drive home as that I think would be the applicable points of this parable for us here today. So just by reading and considering for ourselves, and we consider ourselves in the place of these servants, there's so much to be gleaned and learned from. And so I like to just bring these 3 points of application as we consider ourselves in our role of stewardship. I don't believe I need to sit here and explain, again, all what a steward is, or that when you're saved, that, we have these things that are given to us of God. I believe all these things are already understood by the audience here today. And so I don't want to spend my time there, but rather I just like to talk about what's the difference that can be made as we consider ourselves in the role of these servants and what they did and how they're rewarded. So the first one I'd like to bring here is, number 1, the talents didn't belong to the servants. The talents did not belong to the servants. So if you want to translate that into your time, your talents or abilities, the treasures you have, however you'd like to interpret that, they don't belong to you. These things belong to God. They were given to you by him. They are his possession, and we are put in charge of it. So if you've got an opportunity, if you've got an ability or a talent or finances, whatever it is that God has blessed you with, guess what? That's on loan from God that you're supposed to be using for him. Not for yourself, not for your own gain, not for your own recognition or praise, but rather it's used for him. So the talents did not belong to the servants. The money that was left for the servants, these talents, was not for their pleasure or gain. It wasn't just because so that way they can make themselves, again, famous or rich or whatever else. And sadly, we see this a lot with people in the public eye in the entertainment industry. They have a lot of talent and a lot of abilities, or maybe they've been given a lot of, these people, these different CEOs or people who build big businesses, and they have all this money. They've got all of that that was given to them by the Lord. The Lord allowed them to have all those things, and yet so many of them just use it on such frivolous or wicked things. And they don't recognize that everything comes from God. The ability they had to build that, the opportunities that they had, all of that comes from the Lord. And it wasn't just so that way they could build, this big ivory palace and hide away from the world or whatever else. God has given us these things so we could give him glory and rather bring gain to the cause of Christ. So talents and abilities, they do need to be developed and practiced, but we need to remember they are on loan to us. Maybe there can be a way that you can have like a harsh awakening to this truth where you'll wake up one day and realize something's not working like it used to. I went and played volleyball on Friday with the varsity girls as his first scrimmage match. Brother Vlad and I were out there together. I haven't played volleyball in a while. I think the last time I played was the church picnic in 4th of July last year, so it's been a little while. Tell you what, yesterday morning when I woke up, it felt like I hadn't played volleyball in a long time. Now, out there on the court, I was feeling great. I was moving around. I was diving and stuff. I got some little injuries to prove it and everything. I was super stoked. The next day, I realized I'm not that young anymore. And it was kind of an awakening to something like this. Hey, the strength that I had yesterday, guess what? I don't have that today. My muscles are sore, my legs are sore, or whatever else. Guess what? The strength I have is on loan from the Lord. And I used it in a way yesterday that, I wanted to help and be a blessing, but because I haven't been doing it, I realized that was maybe a little bit of a mistake. But again, I enjoyed it and had a good time. But the strength that I have, I didn't have. I woke up the next morning, again, I'm sore and whatever else. And so it's very easy for us to lose sight of the fact that what we have is not ours, but again, it's given to us of God. I think about and not everyone's going to know who he is, but I remember our brother Randy, who used to sit there in the back of Mark, and some people would have looked at brother Randy and thought just a one-talent guy, stuck in a wheelchair, couldn't get here to church on his own, and couldn't walk, had trouble writing even. He would try and sing out in the services, but he didn't have a dynamic singing voice or whatever else. But I can't even imagine how many hundreds and thousands of people Randy has been a blessing to and witness to through all of his years of ministry, even being in that chair. And it didn't matter that he couldn't, run up and down the court and play basketball or volleyball or whatever else. Every time he was here, he ministered. He was a blessing. He used the little bit that he still had that God had given to him to be a blessing. And so we can look at our lives and be like, oh, well, I don't get this, or I don't have that, or they get to do this, and I don't get to do that, or what. We can, make up all these different scenarios or try to compare ourselves. But remember, what you have doesn't even belong to you. It belongs to the Lord. Number 2, the talents had an expectation. And we touched on this already, but the talents had an expectation. It wasn't given to you to make you feel good about yourself, but rather the gifts and the opportunities that God has given to you in your life are for his benefit, not for yours. The expectation of these talents, as the one talent guy pointed out in verse number 24, is that it was an expectation of growth. It was an expectation of profit, of use. God has given us the time that we have to grow and increase the talents and, again, opportunities he has placed in our lives. We will never We will never do more if we don't do more. If you choose not to use what God has given you, then guess what? It's not going to grow. It's not just going to grow on its own because you just sat there in the sun. Just like plants and everything, it takes care and watering and all these different things. Your talents and opportunities are the same way. Just because you have it and it's sitting there doesn't mean it's benefiting anybody. Put it to work. Do something with it. You won't do more if you don't do more. Your expectation is not the same as someone else's. Not everybody has the same opportunities that were given to them. And so whether it's in public or whether it's in private, whatever else, we all have different expectations on our lives. But the expectation is that we do something, again, with it. My responsibility is not the same as yours, but God has an expectation for me and my talents. So I need to do something with that. And so I want to encourage you, if maybe you're at the point where you may say to yourself, I don't really know where my talents are right now in this stage of life. Stop and ask God, Lord, show me what are the opportunities? What is it, as he said to Moses, what is in thine hand? Oh, well, it's just a rod. God used that rod to perform many miracles, even though it was just a simple staff or a rod that Moses used. So God can use, even small things that we don't recognize as a tool or as a talent. 1 Peter 4:10 tells us, as every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. 1 Peter 4:10. So every man has received the gift. Everyone's got something they can do. And so use it to minister, to meet the needs one to another. And then thirdly here, our final point, the talent's reward was shared by the investor. The talent's reward was shared by the investor. Those who decided to use those talents for their intended purpose, which was to bring their master glory or profit, whatever it is, they also got to share in its bounty. What's the best part about cooking a good meal is eating the good meal. There's some times where, depending on what we have, I'll put together, I'll take an opportunity and I'll get to cook for the family or something, and I'll put something together, and there's nothing that's kind of dissatisfying as much as serving it all out to everybody and then realizing there's none left for you. And that's happened many times. I'll make something up for the kids real quick, and I'm like, oh, this is looking pretty good. And I'll give it to them and then realize, oh, there's not enough left. So the great part about using what God has given you, again, and having it grow in this expectation of it being more than it was when it was placed in your hands, is not only getting to participate in the work, but then also getting to enjoy the fruit and the blessings from it. And I'm so thankful that we don't have to just wait until eternity to see the fruit of our labors. We can see that now, even in the life that God has given us. But those who choose to hide, bury, or keep their talents for themselves, again, they don't partake in the reward because there's no reward for it. There's nothing to be gained other than the fact that they had an opportunity they didn't use. The master did not accept the excuse of the servant, and we can come up with all kinds of excuses. We can come up with all kinds of reasons or point to so many different situations or circumstances or people or whatever, and we can point at all those things and be like, well, let me tell you why I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Let me tell you why I didn't do what the Bible said I should do. Let me go through these things, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to explain to the creator of the universe why I didn't have time to fill in the blank. The master was not interested in excuses. He was interested in their motives, their intentions. And even he says, the intention of, hey, even if you were fearful but you did something, I'm glad you at least would have done something. It wasn't that he had to go out there and be some trailblazer and take his one talent and make it 50 talents or anything else. Rather, he said, if you would have just made some type of moves, some intention that you would do something more, there would be gain to be had. God knows when we are being lazy, selfish, or unspiritual. And we all need to take time, again, to grow up and stop living for me and live for the he. Live for the master and what he has given to us. In conclusion here, your life is more than just a pleasure ride. It's a gift from God with so many blessings to be experienced. And one of those blessings is getting to be a steward of his goods in this world, and that we get to make the most of them by investing them into people, into ministry, into things, again, that make a difference in this life. Some things we have are financial and we can give in that way. Some things, like we said, are time. You can give your time in ministry and labor, your work. Some things are natural or a cultivated ability, something you've learned to do. The auction that's coming up for the school is such a great opportunity for that, because you get to see so many different things that people get to make and kind of use their abilities for, whether it's just in the decorations and stuff. Miss Castro is a superstar at decor and all these kinds of things, props. She has just been in there. If you guys remember, for the Christmas party or the Christmas production that we had with the school, with the Scrooge and everything else that night, the Christmas auction, all the little gingerbread houses and everything around the whole place, she designed all that. She is just so amazingly talented. And while Miss Castro may not come up here on the platform and we put, a medal around her neck or something, she's using her time and she's using the ability she has to make a difference. And so it could be something behind the scenes like that. It could be something where you get to be in front of people, whatever it is. But regardless, do something with what God has given you. The talents of the Christian life come in all shapes and sizes and quantities. Appreciate what God has given to you. Do your best with it and enjoy watching it flourish. Then enjoy the benefits and blessings of the master as he then gives you even more opportunities and things to execute on. So again, this is a familiar passage here. Wasn't a lot of new stuff to break down, but I want to just come at it from the aspect of, again, this life, as we know, as 1 Corinthians tells us, your life is not your own. Your life, finances, time, talents, all these different things, it's not even all for you, but rather it's for him. And so take the time that you have, take the talents you have, your finances, whatever it is, take it and use it for the Lord. Do something with it. And if you don't know what those talents are, or what opportunities are, pray about it. If it's things you can do here at the church, you can come meet with pastor or whoever else and try to figure some of that out. But do something. The ministry of prayer. Yeah, there's people who help clean. There's people who just make phone calls and check in on people or whatever else. There's so many different ways that you can help and be a blessing. And let's not say, well, it's not big enough. It's not important enough that I don't want to execute on it. Do something with what God has given you, again, and then get to enjoy the blessings there.